Ours is a journey that begins in the depths of sorrow, where the echoes of war, loss, and injustice still shatter the silence. Through each note, we confront the harsh realities of a world scared by conflict and tragedy. We bear witness to the pain, the fear, and the courage etched into the memory of humankind. But this is not where our story ends. Through resilience, through hope, through the unbreakable spirit of those who endure from the ashes, the music lifts us, urging us onward, urging us upward, until at last we burst into the brilliance of light. In that radiance, we find triumph, redemption, and the enduring beauty of the human soul. This is not merely a concert, it is a reckoning and a rebirth.
Good evening. My name is Nick Dennison. I play alto saxophone and I've been with the band since the 2015 season. On behalf of the members of the Southern Maryland Concert Band, I would like to welcome you to our 2025 spring concert, From Darkness into Light. Please join me in now welcoming to the stage Principal Conductor, Mr. David Monk. To begin our concert, we would like to honor the men and women of our armed forces and their service to our nation. We are grateful for all they have done and continue to do for us in order that we can enjoy our freedoms. Armed Forces, the Pride of America, is a medley of our military service songs. If you are a veteran, active duty service member, or a family member, please feel free to stand along with some of our members and be recognized during your service song. During the last portion of the medley, we ask that you stand and join us as you are able in the singing of our national anthem. now invite you to stand and join us in the singing of our national anthem.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Monk, and I'm one of the conductors for this evening's concert. Our program this evening is one that explores the human condition through music. We've put together a program featuring pieces that memorialize the victims of man's inhumanity to man, and pieces that celebrate man's capacity for joy and optimism. Our first piece, Daniel Bookwich's Symphony No. 1, in Memoriam of Dresden, 1945, is a musical depiction of the horrors suffered by the citizens and war refugees in February of 1945 in Dresden, Germany. During a 36-hour period, the residents were subjected to a fierce attack that took the lives of 25,000 to 30,000 souls and started a firestorm that lasted for weeks. The symphony is comprised of 4 movements with no pauses in between, as in the usual multi-movement symphonic works. The first movement, Prologue, sets the mood of impending doom and presents much of the thematic material found in the rest of the work. Movement 2, Seeds in the Wind, depicts the method of bombing using particularly insidious incendiary devices and the fury of the attack itself. The third movement, Ave Maria, reflects the religious and artistic heritage of Dresden, and it is a musical prayer for the victims. Firestorm, the final movement, is a non-traditional resolution of the tension presented in the first 3 movements. While there are periods in the first movements of the piece that are very percussive and loud, the final movement makes use of the sounds that simulate falling bombs and explosions, as well as human voices expressing terror and fear. These sounds can be emotional and extremely shocking.
John Roberts, and I have played trumpet in the band for 2.5 years now. Composed in 1989, James Barnes' tone poem, Trail of Tears, is a musical description of the forced removal and march of the 5 civilized Indian tribes from the southeastern U.S. to Oklahoma during the winter of 1838 and 39. During the 1,500-mile forced march, more than 4,000 men, women, and children perished due to the exhaustion, starvation, and exposure to the elements. The music begins with a lone flute intended to portray the bucolic nature of the 5 tribes. The music flows from the peaceful opening through sections of strife and scenes of battles. The final scene depicts the agony of the march and includes a recitation of a mournful poem in Cherokee language, which the band will also eventually say. Here is the translation. Let us mourn those who have died. Let us mourn those who are dying. Let us mourn for those who must endure. Ladies and gentlemen, Trail of Tears.
Jacob, and I've played horn in the band for a year now. Michael Gorkowski's The Cave You Fear takes on a hero's journey to the unknown. Along the way, there's a series of events and conflicts that our hero encounters as they make their way towards some ultimate goal. Our hero is based on the book The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell. This book is required reading in film schools, and it seeks to answer the question, are you going to be able to say a hearty yes to your adventure, in spite of the fear of the unknown you will know? Wow. The fear of the unknown you will encounter along the way. In Campbell's words, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. Will you be able to enter? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our assistant conductor, Mr. Christopher Alberts, to help you enter the cave you fear.
Good evening. My name is Christine Dennison, and I play French horn. I've been in the band since 2015. This Cruel Moon is an adaptation for band of Immortal Fred Sobey, the second movement of Mecky's Wine Dark Sea Symphony for Band. This Cruel Moon is a song of the beautiful and immortal nymph Calypso, who finds Odysseus near death, washed up on the shore of the island where she lives all alone. She nurses him back to health and sings as she moves back and forth with a golden shuttle at her loom. Odysseus shares her bed. 7 years pass. The tapestry she began when she nursed him becomes a record of their love. But one day, Odysseus remembers his home. He tells Calypso he wants to leave her, to return to his wife and son. He scoffs at all she has given him. Calypso is heartbroken. And yet that night, Calypso again paces at her loom. She unravels her tapestry and weaves it into a sail for Odysseus. In the morning, she shows Odysseus a raft, equipped with a sail she has made and stocked with bread and wine, and calls up a gentle and steady wind to carry him home. Shattered, she watches him go. He does not look back.
My name is Jessica Reinhardt, and this is my first year playing alto saxophone for the band. Victor Hugo's epic historical novel, Les Miserables, is the story of Jean Valjean and his quest to lead a life of moral integrity while being persecuted by the relentless police inspector Javert. Alain Boublil's musical adaptation has become one of the most famous musical productions of all time. In his arrangement of selections from Les Miserables, Warren Barker takes us on a musical journey with At the End of the Day, I Dreamed a Dream, Master of the House, On My Home, and Do You Hear the People Sing? Please welcome back to the stage our principal conductor, Dave Monk.
Good evening. My name is Crystal, and I've played clarinet in the band for 4 months. We would like to thank you for attending our concert this evening. and we hope the music we have been performing for you so far has touched you and left you yearning for the light that is to come after intermission. Before we take a short intermission, we would like to leave you with Brian Balmage's Marseille Diabolique. Balmage's loosely follows the traditional march form, but he creates a dark harmonic language in the piece that is centered around the tritone, or the devil's interval. This interval is so dissonant that composers avoided its use for centuries. It was rumored to have been banned by the early Christian church, but these are rumors that have not been substantiated, and the tritone is now a common occurrence in all styles of music.
So before we start this march, I want to introduce you to the tritone. Pretty unstable. This is the tritone in a chord. And that's the instability resolved. So that's the devil's chord.
name is Addison Kelly, and I have played trumpet in the band for 1 year. Welcome back to the second half of our concert. Our opening march was composed in 1914 by Lieutenant F.J. Ricketts under the pen name Kenneth J. Alford. Colonel Bogey quickly became one of the most recognizable marches of all time. During World War II, British soldiers sang some rather disparaging lyrics to the tune about Hitler. The march sustained its notoriety when it was used in the epic film The Bridge Over the River Kwai. The tune and title are rumored to be inspired by a British military officer who whistled a descending minor third rather than shouting "for" when playing golf. We hope you enjoy Colonel Bogey.
Good evening. My name is Christian Thomas, and I've played euphonium in the band for about nine years now. Now in its second year,
Arts for All Singers is a component of Arts for All, which is supported by the Southern Maryland Community Resources. Under the direction of Ms. Therese Thiedemann, the singers have partnered with the Chesapeake Choral Arts Society and are now partnered with the Southern Maryland Concert Band. Please join us in welcoming the Arts for All singers as we journey into the light with a patriotic song.
evening. My name is Ruth Hine. I've played trombone in the band for 20 years. Julie G. Rowe is an American-born composer who has written for film and television and whose work we have performed in the recent past. According to Julie Rowe, One Life Beautiful is a musical double entendre which in one sense is referring to a person this work is dedicated to as in one life that was beautifully lived.
The other sense is a direct observation, including that having only one life is what makes life so sacred, tragic, and so very precious. This piece was gifted to the Southern Maryland Concert Band in memory of my daughter, Mary Ruth Hine. Mary was a lover of music her entire life. Her first concert at the age of 1 month was at the Southern Maryland Concert Band's Fall Summer Concert in 1990. Her last concert was at age 33 in June 2024 at Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado. Mary truly lived one life beautiful.
My name is Sandy Shago, and I have played flute in the band for 31 years. Taken from Norse mythology, trolls are generally thought to be fiendish creatures that, although dangerous, are easy to overcome. Mike Forbes has drawn his inspiration for this composition from his hometown of Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, and the Norwegian traditions that are carried on by its residents. Main Street is referred to as Troll Way and is full of shops that feature wood-carved trolls that adorn the front of their properties. Forbes's Dance of the Trolls is his musical telling of what might happen when all the tourists are gone for the day and the shop owners have shuttered their stores and gone home for the night. Forbes imagines the trolls going to the local pub, getting a drink, and then dancing in the streets until sunrise.
yelling at me. I don't know why Chris is yelling at me. Who said I had Monique's back? Hello, I'm Amber Rainey Hendrick, and I've been on and off with the band since 2004. More so off for quite a few years, and now that I'm back, I went and got myself elected as president of the band. As the president, I would be remiss. As the president, I would be remiss if I didn't thank several people. I promise I will be quick because this is quite a long concert. First and foremost, thank you to my husband for handling the pickups for our daughter Caroline on Tuesdays for me, so that I can do what I love to do on Tuesdays, and as he calls it, it's the band geek meetings. So I don't think T.C. O'Brien is here, or her mom, Frances Armstrong, but T.C. O'Brien is the founder of Hope and Harmony, and her mom, Frances Armstrong, who is the wife of our founder, Charlie Armstrong, for their unwavering support for this band, not just professionally, for guidance to understand Charlie Armstrong's vision for this band, but their continued financial support of the band. Third, the board. You all have really taken the band to new levels since January. We have lots of work to do, and I know you're all up for the challenge. Please stand up as I call your names to be recognized. Vice President Monique Abbott. Secretary Sherry Vanderpump. Secretary Christine Dennison. Music Librarian Tammy Schwartz. Member at Large Fundraising Ruth Hine. Member at Large Social Media and our Technology Person Christian Thomas. And our project manager, DJ Lloyd. And I'd also like to thank our photographer and videographer who is up there, Dave Trick, thank you. The last two board members need to come out here for a second. Chris is already here, I don't know where Dave's at, but oops, my fault. The last two board members are two conductors, principal conductor Dave Monk and assistant conductor Christopher Alves. These two have truly made this band a force in the world of community hospitality. By challenging us with music that inspires us to become better musicians, this band has taken flight through some of the most challenging pieces you have heard this evening. Under their direction, Dave and Chris's direction and their musical leadership, the Southern Maryland Concert Band has and will continue to flourish for the years to come. These are just small tokens of our appreciation for all that you have done for this band. Now, back to the show. Commissioned by Matthew Flinder's Anglican College Wind Symphony, Rapture by Brian Balmages is a piece that was in the making for several years. The request to compose the piece was made before COVID and the resulting shutdown. John Thomas, who spearheaded the commission, also wanted Balmages to include a reference to the hymn tune Helmsley, which was composed in 1763. The hymn opens with the line, "Lo, he comes with clouds descending." According to Balmages, whether you are a person of faith or not, this piece is symbolic of how we choose to respond to life in the wake of tragedy and grief, and the redemption that comes with inner peace and intense reflection.
might be wondering why nobody else is speaking right now. And that's because it's my turn. So before we close for the evening, I do want to say a few words. It has been a desire of mine to present a concert with this theme for a very, very long time. And the circumstances were great. I've got a great musician, the board bought into it, the band bought into it, and I'm hopeful that you all have enjoyed and appreciate what you have heard here this evening. So I've been doing this for 35, 40 years, conducting and playing professionally before that. And I'm the luckiest person in the world because for the last 30 years, I have gotten up every day and not gone to work. I've gone to do something that I love, and that's been playing music. And when I leave that day job and go home in the evening, I get to come here and play with these folks. So thank you very much. And then last of all, but not least, is you all. Without you all, we have no reason to perform. So I want to challenge you, if you like what you've heard here tonight, come back to our next concert and make sure that the 2 to 3 seats that are empty on either side of you are full, so that we have a full audience. Because these folks deserve to be heard. So, to close our program, we're going to perform for you a piece that needs really no description. You'll hear embedded in this piece, exaltation. Arts for all, I'm sorry. Long night. Have a second round,